I wonder what you're going to do after your church today. Perhaps you have something you like to do every Sunday, maybe go down the park or have coffee or have a meal with friends. And this time 3 weeks ago, families in Aleppo and families in the south of Turkey enjoyed their normal Sunday. They were down the park, sharing meals, having coffee, perhaps working. In Syria particularly, it wasn't an easy life, but it had become their normal life of what life was like for them. And they would have gone to bed that Sunday night, perhaps the packed lunch for school on the kitchen table. And then at 4 o'clock in the morning, terror seized them and panic awoke them as they grabbed families, met neighbors on the stairs, and fled down onto the street in whatever clothes they had on. But for too many, it was already too late, as buildings and apartments collapsed and crumbled. No doubt we saw pictures like this, and we've continued to see them in recent weeks. 47,000 people dead in a heartbeat. The numbers are just too big for us to comprehend. How do we make sense of that? And behind each one of those numbers is a person. And we often see, when we see tragedy, when we see loss, when we see such heartache, we do think, what can I do? And giving is one thing. And Marcus has already highlighted just how generous you are as a church already to Medair. And just thank you so much. And I will be asking perhaps individuals to make a decision to give as well this morning. And that's going to help us go further, go the extra mile, indeed the last mile, to reach people in moments of crisis, like what we've seen the last 3 weeks. But it may be that some actually here are skilled and experienced. You may be experienced in logistics or in healthcare or in engineering, and actually those skills can be deployed in a humanitarian context. And if you've ever felt that that's something that you wanted to explore, and maybe take your commercial skills and think about how that works in a humanitarian context, then I'll be at the back. Please do speak to me after as well, because we'd love to talk about that. And prayer. That is certainly something, when we see such tragedy, all of us can do, and we're going to be praying after. And on the Thursday after the earthquake, so just over 2 weeks ago, we gathered online with some friends on the 24/7 prayer network. And my colleague, Raya Lisa, who leads our work in Syria, she was in Aleppo at the time, and at the beginning of this half-hour call, she said, can you please pray for the new government registration to come through so that we can quickly start scaling our response, because we were already in Aleppo doing other work. And by the end of this half-hour prayer, she had a tap on the shoulder from one of her colleagues to say that they had the phone call from the government, we're good to go. And so prayer really does work. We saw it there in a half-hour kind of prayer meeting. And so that's why it's so good that today we are going to think about prayer as a response. And each of my colleagues in some of the world's most difficult places could actually stand here and share stories like Riley says, of answered prayer, of even in that darkness and despair, of these cracks of light, these glimmers of hope. And that really fuels them, really motivates them. And I just want to step back a little moment and introduce myself. Marcus has already said some very warm words, and you've already applauded, so thank you. But I'm here with my wife, Anugra, and so far, our 3 kids are happy next door. And they loved Bubble Church, which was just brilliant. We don't have anything like that at our church back in Ealing. And I joined Medair UK as director last August. And I'd worked for Tier Fund previously, and I've already met Kay, my old colleague here, and we had a nice little chat. And I previously worked for Alpha International as well. And I really joined Medair because I'm so passionate, as I'm sure many of you are, about the world's most vulnerable people. And working with Medair just gives me an opportunity to raise funds, raise support, raise awareness for the outstanding work that we do around the world. And Medair, outside of Ascension, not everyone knows about us, but we've been around about 30 years, and we're really specialized in humanitarian response. So in response to disasters, in response to conflict or in response to disease outbreaks as well. And 1 year ago this weekend, and this is why we had scheduled me to come today, was our team arriving in Poland to start receiving those thousands of refugees who were fleeing Ukraine. In those opening days, it was 100,000 up to 140,000 refugees a day. And we're going to, a little bit later, watch a film about our work in Ukraine over the last year. An early, life-saving response is our top priority. And so much of what we do is focused on health, and we're so often the first NGO on the ground. So we were actually the first international NGO registered in Kyiv after the Ukraine invasion, or invasion of Ukraine last year. Like I said, in Aleppo, our teams were on the ground within 24 hours responding to the earthquake, and in Turkey in 48 hours. And your giving as a church enables us to be the first responders. Other money doesn't come through in that kind of window, but having that money available to go and to send is what really helps us go quickly whenever disaster strikes. And we're so thankful for the partnership with Ascension. I'm told that our office used to be on this road, which is how we met, or not me, but the church and Medair met 15 years back. And Anna Stobart has been on our board, not anymore, but she was on our board for many years as well. I know she's away this weekend. And you've hosted events for us and done all sorts for us as a church. And we're just so thankful for the partnership that we have, and that you've renewed Medair as a mission partner with Ascension. And I do just want to say it's lovely to be here on the day of the christening of Leo and Jesse. And perhaps you're with Mel and John as family and friends. And already coming to church was a little bit odd. And then you've got me, and I've not got maybe the most positive message at times. And so this is all altogether very different. I'll just say, give it another go. I mean, hopefully I don't put you off, but give it another go another week. But it's lovely to be here on the day of their christening. And like I say, I was due to be here with the Ukraine anniversary in mind, but the earthquake in Syria and Turkey maybe has brought into focus for all of us in recent weeks the role of a humanitarian charity like Medair. Let us turn to the Bible. Karen, thank you for reading Psalm 88. And I was given free rein of a psalm to choose, and I've been recently led to this psalm. Psalm 88 is a dark, troubled, and deeply reflective psalm. The psalmist is overwhelmed, near to death, without strength, alone, trapped, shunned by friends, rejected, and in darkness. The author has hit rock bottom. This isn't composed after one bad day, but after a series of events in life that has just brought darkness upon darkness into his life. And it's getting worse. This psalm, like 2/3 of the psalms, are actually a lament. I know my go-to is Psalm 40. He lifted me out of the miry pit. I love Psalm 139. Wherever I may be, I can't flee from his presence. But life can be tough, and there is cause for lament in our world today. And that's why so many of the Psalms consider this. And my Bible summarizes Psalm 88 as, where there is no relief in sight, God understands even our deepest misery. And life can be full of troubles. Even before we think about the earthquake, we need no reminder of that. It feels like in recent years it's been a bit of a roller coaster. Maybe you feel that way. We've had COVID. We've had lockdowns, cost of living, political turmoil, everything just spiraling, it feels like. And each of those have an impact upon us. And then we think about our own lives and maybe sickness, job worries, finances, broken relationships. And life over recent years for some might just feel like a roller coaster they want to get off. And so when you read this psalm, it's almost like holding up a mirror. That you're going, yeah, my life is dark at the moment. And I just want to say, if you feel like that's you this morning, just even being here, choosing to be in person with others is a triumph. And so well done. For others, you might not see your life in this moment now, but family or particular friends come to mind as you read this psalm or think about those situations. And so why don't you hold those in your mind today? It says in verse 1, Lord, you are the God who saves me. Day and night I cry out to you. May my prayer come before you. Turn your ear to my cry. So if we imagine that moment, you've got this psalmist, pen in hand or quill or whatever it may have been back then, and they've got all these emotions going around in their mind. You know, just pinging from one thing to the next. I don't know if I could have sat still and composed this psalm with that level of emotions just kind of simmering on the surface of my heart. But the psalmist chooses to sit and start with saying, Lord, you are the God who saves me. So if we think about this in modern life, he's not reaching for the TV controller, not opening a bottle, not flicking through the news feed to kind of numb the pain and distract the mind, but actually choosing to be really present with God in all that's going on in life and say, Lord, you are the God who saves me. Verse 13, but I cry out to you, Lord, in the morning my prayer comes to you. He's in the eye of the storm, but he comes to God and chooses to pray. And he holds nothing back. Verse 8, he says, you, this is directed at God, you have taken from me my closest friends. Verse 14, why, Lord, do you reject me and hide your face from me? I wonder how reflective this is of your prayer life. When you pray to God, do we just kind of keep everything very plain and vanilla? Or like the psalmist, do we actually say, I am struggling here, God. My life is tough. My life is a mess. And actually, God wants to know what's on our heart. He knows it, but he wants us to surrender it to him. Like we see in this psalm, he wants us to bring those emotions and fears and anxieties almost like with both barrels and just give it to him. And this is what the psalmist does. He surrenders it, knowing that God is his wonderful counselor, mighty God, everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace. But maybe you're in that second camp where you don't see yourself in this psalm this morning. But maybe you see someone else. It says in verse 8, you have taken from me my closest friends and have made me repulsive to them. Perhaps the charge for you this morning is to get alongside someone that you know is suffering so that they cannot say those words, so that they do not themselves feel abandoned or alone in this moment of crisis. Because sometimes it's really easy in the world to kind of shut ourselves away. You know, when we see the news on the TV, we just think, I can't process that today. And we put up these mechanisms just to kind of protect ourselves when it's distant, like in Turkey or Ukraine or Syria. But then it's so easy to do that in life. When there's colleagues and you ask about the weekend and you're like, actually, I didn't really want to know. Or there's people in your life. Maybe your decision today will actually just to be more attentive, just to be more aware, choose to be more present with those around and just give them more time so that they do not feel alone in their moment of need. And so as we consider the psalm, I just want us to think about these three things. That firstly, God is faithful. And let's hold that perspective that God is faithful. And that secondly, that we can come to him with open hearts, surrendering whatever is in our mind or in our heart in that time. And thirdly, that we can be attentive to those who are around us. So we don't know much about this author. We're told that he was a son of Korah. Elsewhere in Chronicles, we think this man is a chap called Heman, but that's pretty much all that we know. But when we consider where he was in life, it's not too far for us to think about those in Syria and Turkey whose lives have been shrouded in darkness and despair these last few weeks. Just like Heman, the earthquake was not a one-off event in an otherwise easy life. The communities in around Aleppo, where we've been working since 2015, have been through crisis after crisis since the start of war 12 years ago. Children who are nearly teenagers have never known peace. They have only ever known war their whole lives, surrounded by conflict. Their hope, that generation's education, their hope, and hope has been eroded year after year. Even before the earthquake, over 4 million people were already in need of humanitarian assistance. Recent outbreak of cholera, an economic situation just nothing like ours here. And they've been hit by another disaster. However, at Medair, we feel our calling is to be there in that moment of suffering, inspired by our Christian faith, to serve all regardless of their own faith. Not taking, but following Jesus' example, to go to those places of greatest suffering where we believe he is calling us to bring his light into the darkness and his hope into the despair. So as we've done many times before, we mobilized quickly. Our teams were on the ground the following day. And we follow this 24/3/7 approach, that within 24 hours of a conflict or crisis, that we are making that desk assessment, taking all the information we can, considering our expertise, our staffing, our logistics, the supply chain. So we're making a go, no-go decision. And that's what we did 3 weeks ago. And then within 3 days, we're on the ground, setting up supply chains, meeting local people, mobilizing a greater workforce. And within 7 days, we're beginning our humanitarian relief, maybe giving out essential items, stoves, blankets, mattresses, food, maybe setting up health appointments, which we've been doing as well. And we're not search and rescue, but we are specialists in rapidly scaling healthcare, shelter, food distributions in the wake of disease, disaster, and displacement. And our head office, our global support office, is in Switzerland, and they often use a refrain of our approach is a bit like a Swiss Army knife. That multi-tool where we can combine all those different specialisms and really serve people's greatest need. And as I said, we had the Ukraine anniversary in mind. And this is 1 year this weekend. You'd have been hard-pressed to miss it, I think, this week with what's been in the news. And we're just going to watch this short video that just highlights the different ways that you have a church and as Medair have supported our response in Ukraine.
There's been relentless air raids these last few nights.
Hear explosions every day.
We've received, I think it was 83,000 people in 12 hours.
My brother is 5 years old, and we don't know what we will do.
1 year ago, the conflict in Ukraine resulted in millions of people being displaced from their homes. Medair responded quickly, with our emergency response team arriving at the Polish border to receive Ukrainian refugees within the first days of the conflict. We quickly realized we needed to respond within Ukraine, and within weeks, we launched our response in the country.
We went to Ukraine for the first time. So this is about 5 days after we arrived in country.
We've already started our programs, we've started distributions, we've got a team of local volunteers. We've been able to mobilize remotely high-level, director-level coordinators in Western Ukrainian cities who have connections with the local authorities. We have invitation letters to work there. We are lining up with long-term supply chains to provide large quantities of aid to these cities. And I think it feels like it's been months. I've been on programs for months that half of this stuff doesn't happen so quickly.
We served those in the west of Ukraine who have been displaced, but we also respond in the north and east into areas that are directly impacted by the conflict. Medair responds with health programming, critical distribution of items such as blankets and hygiene items. We're working to repair hospitals to get them up and running again. Medair also responds by repairing shelters and mental health programming.
It's plunging below 0 degrees at night, and many people do not have cooking wood or fuel for their fires and for their heating equipment. Afraid to go and get wood from the forests nearby because of mines that have been left there. This will be a very difficult winter. The hope and optimism of the local communities is inspiring.
А зробити, допомогти нема кому в селі. Це десь Бог послав вас сюди. Волонтери, що сказати. Хлопці зробили. На совість зробили такі молодці, що важко переоцінити.
Throughout this first year of the conflict, we have been amazed by the generosity of our donors, the strength of our staff, both those that have come from all over the world and our incredible Ukrainian team. We ask you to remember that this conflict continues, it's not over yet, and we continue to need your support, those willing to come and serve in Ukraine, and your prayers. Thank you.
So I would love to ask you to give this morning, individually, perhaps something that is something that you could consider. And as you consider that, there is a postcard on your seat. You can pick it up, and it's got a little QR code. We've all become very familiar with those, and it will take you to a donation page that you may be able to visit. And perhaps you'd be able to give once or start a regular gift towards Medair personally this morning. Because when, as I've already said, you give regularly, it helps us to plan and be so much more effective to be able to respond quickly whenever and wherever disasters strike. And so many of the places where we work are not in the headlines this week. On Tuesday, Cyclone Freddy landed in Madagascar. Just 3 weeks ago, it was Cyclone Chinesso in Madagascar. But we're there working with communities to both make them more resilient to these cyclones and respond when they hit. And our teams mobilize quickly this Tuesday. We're there in Afghanistan still. I remember getting the BBC News alert on Christmas Day saying many agencies have to pull out of Afghanistan because of the situation there, but we are still there, reaching communities in the Central Highlands and other remote areas with much needed critical healthcare. In Yemen, our teams are just 15 kilometers to 20 kilometers from the front line of conflict, providing water and sanitation to the communities there. And so giving regularly really helps us reach those places that won't come through to our BBC News top stories. You know, there's many places where we seek to work as well. And we work in different ways in different places. Like I said, a bit like a multi-tool. In Syria, we've been there since 2015, and we're now scaling our team there with surge capacity rapidly over the coming weeks. In Turkey, we don't have any existing programs, so we're working through partners and churches. And in Ukraine, we're increasingly, as Megan said, a national Ukrainian team. So we still deploy some people from the UK and elsewhere to go and train others, more of our national team, in a lot of our programs in the way of responding. So just thank you so much for you as a church, for your partnership with Medair, and perhaps individuals who feel able to support us this morning by giving regularly. This morning, we've spent some time looking at Psalm 88 and some time hearing about Medair's work as well. And as I begin to close, I just want to go to Psalm 46. And this psalm is, again, written by the sons of Korah. It could be the same person called Heman. We don't know, but on a slightly different day, they would have written this psalm. And it says this in verse 1. God is our refuge and strength, always ready to help in times of trouble. So we will not fear when earthquakes come and the mountains crumble into the sea. Let the oceans roar and foam. Let the mountains tremble as the waters surge. He says, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. I do not assume that if I was in one of those communities hit by an earthquake 3 weeks ago, that I would be able to say, I will not fear when the earthquakes come. But thinking about our own life, the storms or roller coasters that maybe some may be experiencing, perhaps you need to declare that for yourself this morning. To rely on God's faithful love and grace over your life. His unshakable strength. And perhaps you can say those words and stand with those who are suffering this morning through your giving, through your prayers, and through your support. Thank you so much.